The day my mother's will was read, my brother already had the champagne chilled at home. I know because his wife mentioned it. Not quietly, not to herself, but loud enough for me to hear across the waiting room of Mr. Bellamy's law office on Bloor Street. She laughed when she said it, like it was a charming detail rather than a cruel one. I just looked down at my coffee cup and said nothing. That was something I had a lot of practice doing by then. Saying nothing. My name is Nora. I'm the younger daughter, the one who stayed in Sudbury when everyone else moved on to bigger things. My brother, whose name is Kevin, left for Toronto the week after he graduated from Western. That was 22 years ago. He built a career in commercial real estate, married a woman named Trish, who wore her highlights like armor, had 2 boys who called my mother Grandma Carol, maybe 4 times a year, on her birthday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and whenever Kevin needed her to feel guilty enough to write a check. I stayed because someone had to. That's not a heroic statement. It's just the truth. My mother was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's when she was 63. I was 30 at the time, teaching elementary school in the same district I grew up in, renting a small house on Lark Street, not 20 minutes from the family home where she still lived alone. Kevin was in the middle of a development deal in Etobicoke. He sent her a weighted blanket and a Google Home so she could ask it questions. I started driving over 3 evenings a week to make dinner. Within 2 years, 3 evenings became 5. Then every day. By the time she was 68, I had moved into the spare room of her house on Moonglow Crescent. I did not sublet my rental. I lost the deposit and 2 months of overlap rent because I didn't have time to manage it. I requested a leave of absence from teaching. I spent those years managing her medications, her physiotherapy appointments at Health Sciences North, her grocery orders, her CRA correspondence when she got confused by the paperwork, her friendships, which she wanted to maintain even as the disease made phone calls harder. I drove her to her book club on the 2nd Tuesday of every month until she was 80, and the book club itself disbanded because 3 of the members had died. Kevin came at Christmas. He stayed 4 days the first year, 3 the second, then 2. He brought wine that was too expensive for my mother's taste and complained that the guest room mattress needed replacing. One December, he pulled me aside in the hallway and told me I was doing an amazing job. He said it the same way he would have complimented a contractor on a reno. Then he asked if I thought Mum would consider putting the house in both our names for tax purposes. I told him that wasn't my decision to make. He dropped it. He was good at dropping things when they didn't go his way quickly enough. He just filed them somewhere and came back later. What Kevin never seemed to remember, or perhaps chose not to, was that the house on Moonglow Crescent was not just a house. My mother had told me the history of it, so many times I could recite it like a bedtime story. She and my father had bought it in 1987 for just under $90,000. A figure that made her laugh in her later years when the property assessments had climbed past $700,000. My father died when Kevin and I were teenagers, a sudden cardiac event on a Tuesday morning. And from that point on, my mother had maintained the house alone with the kind of stubborn, quiet dignity that was simply how she moved through the world. She refinished the hardwood floors herself. She replaced the kitchen faucet with a YouTube tutorial and a wrench from Canadian Tire. She kept a vegetable garden in the backyard every summer until the Parkinson's made bending over too difficult, and even then she supervised me while I did the planting, telling me which rows got more sun. She loved that house the way some people love a person. Kevin called it a money pit. He said it needed a new roof, updated electrical, window replacements. All of which was true. He said it would cost more to maintain than to sell. He said Mum should think seriously about liquidating the asset and moving somewhere with real support. What he meant, I think, was that the house was inconvenient for him. It required upkeep, attention, presence. It was the kind of thing you had to actually show up for. And he was not someone who showed up. There was one conversation I will never forget. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October, about 18 months before my mother died. Kevin had come up from Toronto. which was itself unusual, and after lunch he sat at the kitchen table with a printout from some realtor's website and walked my mother through comparable sales in the neighborhood. He was patient. He was persuasive. He had clearly prepared. My mother listened to the whole thing. She looked at the printout. Then she folded it in half, slid it back across the table, and said, "I know exactly what this house is worth, Kevin. I'm choosing to stay in it." He drove back to Toronto that evening without saying goodbye to me. After that visit, something shifted between my mother and me. She became more deliberate. She asked me questions about things she had never asked about before. My retirement savings, my plans, what I wanted for myself once she was gone. I told her I hadn't thought that far. She said she had thought about it for both of us. I didn't know what she meant at the time. I assumed it was the kind of thing you say when you know time is running short. She passed in March, quietly, in her own bedroom on Moonglow Crescent, with the window cracked slightly, because she always said she slept better with fresh air.
I was in the next.
I heard when her breathing changed. I was holding her hand within 30 seconds. It was the only time in 7 years that I felt like I had nothing left to do for her, and I didn't know what to do with that feeling. Kevin arrived 4 hours later. He had taken the 400 south and then the 69 back up, hitting traffic near Parry Sound. He walked into the house, looked around like he was taking inventory, and told me she would have wanted us both to be strong. I nodded. I made him tea. I said nothing. The funeral was held at a chapel on Barrydown Road. More people came than I expected. Her book club friends, or the ones still living. Former colleagues from her years working at the school board. Neighbors she had known for 40 years. A woman from her church group who had driven 2 hours from Timmins because she said my mother had sent her a card every year on her birthday without ever missing one. I had not known that. I cried harder at that than at almost anything else. Kevin gave a eulogy. It was well written. He thanked her for her sacrifices, her strength, her love of the family. He did not mention Moonglow Crescent. He did not mention the book club rides or the physio appointments or the medication chart I kept on the fridge with color-coded tabs. Afterward, in the parking lot, Trish told me it was a beautiful service. She was already on her phone by the time she finished the sentence. 3 weeks later, we sat in Mr. Bellamy's office. The waiting room was beige and warm, the kind of law office that had framed landscape prints on the walls and a candy dish on the reception desk. Kevin sat with his ankles crossed, scrolling through something on his phone. I sat with my hands in my lap and watched the snow fall on Bloor Street through the window. It was the kind of wet March snow that doesn't stick, just darkens everything it touches. Mr. Bellamy called us in at 10:15. He was a small man in his late 60s, with neat gray hair and half-moon glasses, and he spoke with the particular gentleness of someone who had done this many times and understood what it cost people. He offered us water. We declined. He opened a folder. He went through the standard assets. First, her accounts had been fully drawn down over the last several years of care, the contents of the house. Then he reached the section on property. The residence at Moonglow Crescent, he said, along with all contents and appurtenances, is to pass in its entirety to Nora. I heard Kevin shift in his chair. Mr. Bellamy continued. The remaining financial assets, modest, a few accounts totaling around $14,000, were to be split equally. Kevin would receive his half in a direct transfer. My half was already accounted for in a separate arrangement Mr. Bellamy said he would explain shortly. Kevin set down his phone. "Can we go back to the house?" he said. "The house on Moonglow?" "Of course," said Mr. Bellamy. "She left it entirely to Nora." "That's correct." Kevin leaned back. He let out a slow breath through his nose, the kind that's designed to sound composed, but isn't. Then he turned to me. "So you got the house," he said. His voice was level, even, but there was something underneath it. "That's the big inheritance. The fixer-upper on Moonglow." I didn't say anything. He almost laughed. He pressed his lips together. "I guess living there for free for 6 years has its advantages." I felt the words land. I looked at the table. You gave up your career for a house that needs $40,000 in repairs, he said. And then, quieter, almost to himself but not quite. Maybe if you'd focused on getting her actual help instead of playing the devoted daughter, the estate would have been in better shape. The room went very still. Mr. Bellamy did not look up immediately. He let a moment pass the way a person does when they want to give something time to settle. Then he straightened the papers in front of him. There is, in fact, one additional matter, he said. Your mother was quite specific about the order in which this was to be addressed. Kevin frowned. What do you mean? Mr. Bellamy removed a second folder from his briefcase. This one was older, the edges worn, held closed with an elastic band. Approximately 4 years ago, he said. Your mother retained a separate financial advisor to act independently of her primary accounts. She was quite deliberate about this. She wanted it kept private until this meeting. He removed several documents and laid them on the table. Then he reached into the folder and brought out a letter. It was written by hand on her personal stationery, the cream paper with the small blue flower in the corner that she had used for every birthday card and thank you note I had ever seen her send. She asked me to read this aloud, said Mr. Bellamy. He unfolded it carefully. I had not known about the letter. I felt something close in my throat. To my children, he began. If you are hearing this, I have already gone, and I trust that Mr. Bellamy has done as I asked. There are some things I want, said clearly, because I know how easily things get blurry after a person dies. People start to remember the version of events that suits them best. I want the record to be clean. Kevin was very still. Kevin, I love you. I have always loved you. You built a life for yourself, and I am proud of the ambition in you, even when it frustrated me. Mr. Bellamy paused briefly, then continued. But I know what these last years looked like. I was sick, not unaware. I saw who drove me to my appointments. I saw who reorganized her own life to be near mine. I saw who answered the phone at 2 in the morning when I was frightened and in pain. That was not you, and I want it said plainly, because I know you have a way of minimizing things you find inconvenient. I heard Kevin exhale slowly beside me. Nora never asked me what she would receive. Not once. She didn't plan around it, didn't hint at it, didn't keep a running tally of what she was owed. She just showed up. Every day. For years. I want her to have the house because she already knows how to take care of it, and because home is not an asset class. It's where you live your life. She understood that. I always hoped you would come to understand it, too. Mr. Bellamy turned the page. As for the second matter, 4 years ago, I worked with a financial advisor to establish a registered education savings plan and a separate non-registered investment account in trust for Nora. I used funds that were mine to use from the sale of your father's business equipment after he passed, which I held privately because I didn't want either of you to think of it as part of the family estate. I let it grow. The investment account, as of last month, holds just over $280,000. I stopped hearing anything for a moment. Kevin turned his head slowly and looked at me. Mr. Bellamy was still reading. And I want Nora to have the freedom to go back to teaching if she wants to, or to do something entirely different. I want her to have options. She spent 6 years narrowing her options for me. This is what I can do in return. It's not enough. Nothing would be enough. But it's what I have, and I give it to her with the whole of my love. He set the letter down. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Kevin said quietly, "Where did she get $280,000? Mr. Bellamy explained the account. The original sum from the equipment sale in 1998. The advisor she had worked with, a woman named Dr. Yoon at a firm in North Bay. The reinvestment over 26 years. Compound growth at a modest but consistent rate." He said it the way a doctor explains a diagnosis. Clearly, without editorializing. Kevin's jaw was tight. He picked up the papers and looked through them. His hands were steady, but they were also the hands of someone trying to stay very controlled. "She never told me about any of this," he said. "No," said Mr. Bellamy. "She was very clear that she did not want to. She was concerned the information would affect family dynamics during her care." Kevin put the papers down. There it was. The thing that didn't need to be said but was now hanging in the room like smoke. My mother had known. She had watched and understood exactly what was happening in her own family for years. She had protected herself, and me, from the conversation that would have turned her final years into a negotiation. She was always the smartest person in any room she entered. I don't know why I was surprised. Kevin stood up. He thanked Mr. Bellamy in a voice that was carefully polite. He did not look at me when he picked up his coat. He got halfway to the door and then stopped. He turned around. He looked at me for the first time since Mr. Bellamy had started reading. I don't know what he was expecting to see. Guilt, maybe. Or triumph. I wasn't feeling either. I was thinking about the last time I had seen my mother in her garden, the summer before everything got too difficult, pointing at the tomato stakes and telling me they needed to go in deeper, or the plants would fall over by August. I was thinking about how she had been right and how I had gone back the next morning and reset every single one. I didn't know, Kevin said finally. His voice was different now. Smaller. About any of it. What it was like. What you were doing every day. I looked at him for a moment. I know you didn't, I said. He nodded once. Then he left. Mr. Bellamy gave me a moment before continuing. He slid the investment account documents across the table, explained the transfer process, told me the timeline for the probate to clear. He spoke gently and practically, the way good lawyers do when they understand that what they're managing is not just paperwork but the last act of someone's life. When we finished, I stepped outside onto Bloor Street into the wet March air. The snow had mostly stopped. A streetcar went by, rattling on its tracks. Across the road, a woman was walking a golden retriever who kept stopping to investigate every patch of gray slush with complete and total dedication. And for some reason, that small, ordinary scene, that dog, that woman, that unremarkable Tuesday morning, made me feel something crack open in my chest in a way that wasn't grief exactly. It was something more like relief. And underneath the relief, something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Space. Just space. Room to breathe. Room to figure out what I wanted. I thought about going back to teaching. I thought about the application I had started 3 years ago for a graduate program in educational psychology at Laurentian and then abandoned because I didn't have the time. I thought about the vegetable garden on Moonglow Crescent that would need to be turned over in April if I wanted anything to grow this year. I thought about my mother sitting at her kitchen table, folding Kevin's realtor printout in half, sliding it back across to him and saying, "I know exactly what this house is worth." She always had. She just waited until the right moment to say so. I walked to my car. I drove north on the 69, past Parry Sound, past the lakes going gray under the cloudy March sky. I had a house to go back to. I had a garden to plan. I had, for the first time in years, the particular quiet luxury of not knowing exactly what came next, and not being afraid of it. That felt like the inheritance she really meant to give me.